we are very pleased to welcome you today to this webinar. I'm Roxane Kuzu. I'm hosting this webinar with my colleague Charlotte Deguy. So this webinar is about the election of the CSE, so the Social and Economic Committee, how to renew it and how to implement it. So on the agenda for today, we are going to see how to install and how to renew the CSE. After that, we'll see the stages of the professional elections, which are quite long because we have a specific calendar for it. So we'll explain all of that to you. And after that, we'll see what happens once the election is done with the first meeting and the elected representatives. So I will let my colleague Charlotte present you what is the CSE and what for.
Well, thank you very much, Roxane, and hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to have this webinar with you on that topic. We'll start with explaining to you what is the CSE and what is the purpose of it. So, the CSE is what we call the Social and Economic Committee, and it's the equivalent of what some of you can call the company's work council. Actually, the CSE is only made of elected employees, so people belonging to the company and having an employment contract, and the president of the CSE will be the employer or someone who's able to represent the employer. So, as you will see after, setting up the CSE can be mandatory by law when some specific headcount conditions are met. We thought it was very important to explain you first what's the purpose of the CSE, what's its missions. And actually, you'll see that the CSE's missions will depend on the company's size. As here, we are going to see first the common main missions of the CSE, regardless the company's headcount. So first, the CSE presents individual and collective claims to the employer related to salaries, labor code issues, and other legal rules application. The CSE's role is also to promote health, safety, and work conditions improvement in the company. The CSE also leads investigations in case of work accident in the company. It also has what we call a warning right, and it can also refer to the Labor Inspectorate of all complaints and observations relating to the application of French Labor Code or, more generally speaking, legal provisions. In addition, the CSE's advice should also be required on specific topics such as paid leaves, work conditions arrangements, employees relocation when you're facing a situation of dismissal. All those missions are global and general missions to all CSE, regardless the headcount of the company. Then we'll see that in companies over 50 employees, the CSE has specific additional missions. First, it has economic missions. The CSE must be given specific information on a regular basis, and also he will have to give its advice on several topics. For example, the CSE remains informed and consulted on matters concerning the organization, management, and general operation of the company. The CSE is also informed and consulted on strategic orientations, economic and financial situation, social policy of the company, and working conditions. Also, the CSE's mission are also about health, safety, and work conditions. And it also has what we call social missions. What you have to know and what is also important is that CSE in companies over 50 employees also benefit from a budget, what we call a functioning budget, but also a social and cultural activities budget. So there are two budgets for the CSE, and the functioning budget is supported by the employer, who has to pay the CSE 1.2% of the payroll. So the challenges in setting up or renewing the CSE. Here we are going to explain to you the conditions in which you have to set up the CSE. So the first question is when to proceed with the elections and what are the conditions for setting up the elections. So what you have to know is that the French Labour Code says that a social and economic committee is set up in companies with at least 11 employees. And the setup is mandatory only when the company counts at least 11 employees during 12 consecutive months. And the method of calculating the number of employees are those provided by the French Labour Code. Okay, so here you see that you have double conditions to be obliged to set up the CSE. First, you need to have at least reached the 11 employees, and you must have reached this threshold for at least 12 consecutive months. Okay, so if the workforce falls below the threshold of 11 employees, the 12 months countdown is reset to 0. So this is very important to know. The threshold of 11 employees corresponds to what we call 11 full-time equivalent employees. So it means that you have to do a pro rata temporis calculation. A full-time employee is counted as 1 unit, and a part-time employee will be calculated as 0.5 units. Fixed-term contract and temporary workers are not included if they replace an employee of the company. And work-study contracts such as apprenticeship, professionalization contracts are not taken into account. Also, under certain conditions, employees on secondment must be taken into account. And so the obligation of setting up the CSE arises when the threshold of 11 employees is reached. So the conditions of renewal. What you have to know also is that the members of the CSE are elected for 4 years, but it is possible to provide a different duration. This will be the case when, for example, the company's collective bargaining agreement or the branch collective agreement or group company agreement or even a company agreement provide for a different duration, but this duration will be between 2 and 4 years. So new elections must be organized by the employer when the term of office expires. So when you arrive at the end of the 4 years, you have to organize the election and you have to anticipate. Nevertheless, renewal will not be required if the company's workforce falls under 11 employees. And this is what we just explained to you before. So employers who fail to organize elections when they should, in case of renewal or first implementation, are exposed to several risks. And we thought it was important to explain to you those risks because one of the questions we have very often is what do I risk if I don't organize the election? What are the risks if I don't have a CSE? And you'll see that the risks in question are quite important and numerous. At first, the main risk is a conviction for obstruction called délit d'entrave, which is an offense, and you can be sentenced to 1 year of prison and a fine of 7,500 euros. In addition, in the absence of elections minutes showing the absence of candidates, the procedure for unfitness and the procedure for economic dismissal, but also other type of breaches may also be raised in litigation. Because in this process, you'll see that you have to inform the CSE of the dismissals, and the CSE also has a role to play in that type of process. In addition, the scope of collective rules in the company is also affected. For example, if you want to do what we call a denunciation of a company practice, it means when you want to end a company practice in order to put an end to it or to replace it, it's also necessary to inform the CSE. And also, you will face the impossibility to negotiate a company agreement if you're a company with at least 50 or more employees. Also, it's necessary to organize the election if you want to set up a profit sharing scheme in the company.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Charlotte, for this presentation. Now I'll explain to you the stages of a professional election, and we'll see the calendar that surrounds this elections. So first of all, once you have election, you need to have a permanent members and substitutes members. So this number of members depends on your company's headcount. For instance, when you have between 11 and 24 person in your company, you will have only one permanent member and one substitute member. So as you see, the table in front of you shows only until 900 employees, but this table actually goes up until 10,000 employees. So you have a lot more. So for your employees to candidate to one of these two positions, they must specify in their application the position for which they're applying. This meaning they have to specify if they want to be a permanent member or if they candidate for a substitute member. If the candidate applies for both, you have to, well, there needs to be a preference to be given to the permanent position. I would like to have a quick reminder on the conditions in order to be a candidate or an elector. So to be an elector to the election, to this election, you have to be at least 16 years old. You have to work in the company for at least 3 months, and there should not be any prohibition, disqualification, or incapacity relating to your employee's civil rights. To be a candidate to the elections, your employee needs to be at least 18 years old. They need to work for at least 1 year in the company. They must not be the employer's spouse, partner in a civil solidarity pact, ascendant, descendant, brother, sister, or any relatives on the same degree. Also, the candidate to the election must not be assimilated to the employer or be the effective representative before the committee. So regarding the stages, this slide shows for all the committees election, but on the next slide I will show you a specification regarding committees for companies with less than 20 employees. So regarding the stages right here, you see that first you have to inform your employees about the CSE elections. This information must be at least 20 days before must be 80 days. Sorry, I said 20 days. 90, yes. 90 days before the first round of elections. Yes. Then after you need to invite trade unions to negotiate the memorandum, so the pre-election agreement. This is very important because it explains how the election will be led. So in this agreement, you'll need to include the following elements: the company's account, the electoral colleges, which are the groups depending on the status of your employees. So for example, you can have a group for your employees status managers, exactly, or employees or
non-executives.
Exactly. After, you need to include the application procedure. You need to include the term of office and number of representatives to be elected. So the term of office is the duration of the mandate, and the number of representatives is what I explained on the slide just before this one. You need to include the gender breakdown per college. If you wish to have postal voting, you'll need to have information about this arrangement. And you also need to include the dates of the electoral calendar relating to the first and the second round voting. So this is very important because all the calendar is based on also these dates. Considering the step 2, if no union is present at the meeting, or if the parties fail to reach an agreement, the employer must set up on his own the condition for organizing the elections by a unilateral decision. And in this unilateral decision, the content will be the same as for a pre-election agreement. So after all this second step, you will have this third step, which is actually with the second step about the negotiation of the pre-election. And the fourth step is posting the protocol or the unilateral decision and the electoral list. So the difference, the particularity for companies with less than 20 employees is that on the first step, you must inform the employees. And if you have no employees that show up within 30 days, you'll have to go directly to the step 4, which means you have to post the unilateral decision and the voter lists. So just to sum up some of the deadline calendars, the first round of election, as I said, must at least be 90 days after informing the employees, which is the step 1. The renewal, in case you have a renewal of your committee, it will need to be at least 2 months before the end of the mandate. So you'll have to invite the trade union on step 2 2 months before your elected members, before their mandate ends.
You have to anticipate. It's very important when you already have a CSE in place in the company to anticipate the end of the mandate in order to be compliant with the deadlines.
Exactly. And also, for your information, if you need to have a second round of election, there need to be at least, no, maximum of 15 days between the first round and the second round. So this is what we will see now. It's the fifth round, fifth step is to receive the candidate list for the first round or lack of union nomination. After you'll have to have the first round. And during this first round, only trade unions may nominate candidates. So all employees that are candidates cannot be nominated candidates. The candidates must be equally divided between men and women to have a gender equality. You'll need to respect quorum conditions to have this first round, which means that if the quorum condition has not been reached, you'll need to proceed with the second round. This quorum conditions is reached if the number of voters is at least equal to half of the electors registered on the electoral list, which means if you have, for instance, 30 employees electors, your quorum will be of 15 employees voters. Once this first round is done, you'll need to inform of the results and or give information concerning the organization of the second round.
Just one information regarding trade unions candidates. Just to specify that candidates can only be employees of the company. But for the first round, we can only have trade unions candidates, which means that only employees who are registered in a trade union can candidate at for the first round.
Yes, thank you very much. So the following steps is if you first round results and informing on the organization of the second round, which, as I said, must be maximum 15 days after the first round. During this second round, you will not have the same features as for the first round, which means that our applications are free. So as Charlotte just explained, in the first round, you need trade unions candidates, whereas in this round, all employees that can be candidates can apply. The application are not obliged to respect the gender parity, which is much easier. There is no quorum conditions, and all vacant seats remain free, which means that if, for instance, the quorum in the first round was reached, but still some seats remain free, candidates in the second round can hope to be elected on these seats. Finally, you'll have to proclaim the results and inform the administration. So from step 5 to step 10, these steps are for all committees election, regardless of the number of the company's headcount. So this is just a quick view of the minutes, of the elections minutes that the election office will need to fill once the election is done. So after the first round and after the second round. And even if, for instance, there is a failure to achieve results, you'll still have to complete this election minutes.
Yeah, well, just one precision on that document. Actually, it's very formal, but this is an administration, well, it's a form coming from the French administration. So it's not possible for you to use another template document. It's really this form you have to use once you are implementing your elections. This is very important. You have one for the permanent members, and you also have one for the substitutes, and you have also one per college. So you'll have one for the executives or managers, for example, and one for the non-executives, meaning, well, yes, you can have several forms like that to fulfill, depending on the number of college and what we call permanent and substitutes candidates. So after the elections, we thought, Roxanne and I, that it was important to tell you what's next. This is very, we think, important information for you to have. So, regarding the first meeting of the CSE, well, we wanted to show you some topics that can be discussed at first for the very first meeting. So, most of the time, the employer reminds during the first meeting the CSE, well, the newly elected CSE members, the role of the CSE. So you can present the members their responsibilities, maybe also operating procedures, meaning the way you want the CSE to communicate with you, to ask questions. Do you want to provide deadlines for the CSE to ask questions and for you to answer? This is the occasion to set the rules. You can also talk about the means and resources for the representatives to make the CSE work. For example, will they have specific premises? Is there a board somewhere in the company where they can post their communications to the employees, etc., etc. Also, it's the right time to talk about training programs for the representatives because depending on the size of the CSE, you can have the obligation to train the CSE members to their new duty. We'll see that after also. And it's also the time to proceed with the various appointments. For example, you'll have to nominate a secretary, a treasurer, and also a harassment reference. This is true in CSE over 50, well, CSE of companies over 50 employees. In the CSE, you have to nominate a secretary, a treasurer, and a harassment reference. They are chosen among the CSE members. The secretary is the person who will write the CSE minutes after each meeting. The treasurer is the CSE member who will be responsible for the CSE bank account, if any. We'll see that after also. Also, you can talk about appointment of members to various commissions. For example, what we call CSSCT. It's the Security and Safety, Health Conditions, etc. Committee, which is mandatory in companies over 300 employees. You can also debrief on the end of the CSE's management and discharge of the new CSE. This is in case of renewal, and also give an update on the CSE's bank account in order for the new CSE members to know about the situation. Also, you can give information on the company's legal and economic situation. For example, what type of company is that? What's the collective company's collective bargaining agreement? Who are the shareholders, etc., etc. Also, you can give information on CSE operation, functioning, and internal rules, and it's also maybe the right time to talk about the opportunity of setting up a CSE handbook, which is a very useful document that explains the way the CSE is going to function. And also you can schedule the upcoming meetings. So all those topics can be talked about during the first meeting. Then, regarding the functioning of the CSE, well, as you may know, the CSE has to discuss mandatory topics with the employee and the employer, sorry, and the legislator in France wished to give a specific rhythm to those meetings, depending on the company's headcount. So here you have a sum up of the rules regarding the meetings. So depending on the headcount, you see that companies under 50 employees should have at least one meeting per month. So the CSE and the employer have to meet at least once a month. Regarding for companies between 50 and 300 employees, the CSE members and the employer have to meet at least 6 times a year. And the legislature also imposed a regularity, meaning that they have to meet at least once every 2 months. Most of the time, companies meet once a month, even companies between 50 and 300 employees, because as you'll see after, for those companies, there are many topics to talk about, and there are actually mandatory topics. So if you meet only twice, only once every 2 months, you risk to spend your day in meetings because you'll have too many topics to talk about. So that's why they split and have more meetings. And for companies of more than 300 employees, they have to meet at least once a month. Well, regarding the CSE member statute, as you may know, CSE applicants and elected CSE members are considered as protected employees. So what does it mean? It means that they benefit from a specific termination, they benefit from a specific protection, especially regarding termination process. Benefiting from this specific protection, it doesn't mean that you can't dismiss or sanction a CSE member. No, but you have to abide by a specific process. So, for example, for dismissal and amicable termination process, you first have to ask, you need to have your standard process, but also you need to ask for the CSE advice. And also, and this is very important, you need to have the work inspectorate authorization. And the work inspectorate will also leave an investigation or an inquiry regarding the dismissal. So these protections means that applicants, elected CSE members, and elected substitutes will be protected. So applicants are protected for 6 months. So during the 6 months, they'll benefit from this very specific termination process. Elected CSE members and substitute will also benefit from this specific termination process during the whole period of their mandate, plus 6 months after the end of their mission. So it's quite a long protection. As I told you, CSE members also benefit from a mandatory training. Actually, they can have training in health, safety, and working conditions. This is mandatory in principle. They also benefit from training regarding economic responsibilities, but this training is mandatory in companies over 50 employees only, and for permanent members who are elected for the first time, because if they are re-elected, they may have already benefited from this training. And if need be, you should know that ActiveForce, which is one of our subsidiary, can can give training courses for CSE elected representatives in order for you to meet your legal obligations, and also for CSE chairman, so meaning the CSE president. But it's also possible to have this training for HR directors or HR managers who are dealing with CSE members. It can help them acquire fundamentals of the CSE, well, to be familiar with how the CSE works, what are your obligations as an employer regarding the CSE, but also how to manage my CSE, how to deal with a complicated relationship with my CSE, and so on and so forth. So it's quite complete training courses that our subsidiary called ActiveForce can provide you with. So you know we can help you on that topic if need be. Well, I think this is it. Well, thank you for your attention. I don't know if we have maybe some questions on the chat. We are going to check.
We have one question. It says, what happens when the company counts falls under a certain threshold during the mandates? So I guess it's, for instance, if the company's headcount falls under 11 employees during the during the mandate. In this case, there is no incidence. The mandates are carried until the end of the term. However, once the mandates are ended, once you arrive at the term, if you are under 11 employees, for instance, you will not renew your CSE. So for now, I
have one question. It's what's the difference between the protocol and the unilateral decision? Well, actually, that's a very good question. As you could see in the previous slides of the presentation, you have two options regarding the process of the election itself. At first, you need to invite the trade unions to negotiate a protocol. The protocol sets the rules of the elections. It means that you have to provide many information regarding the way the elections are going to unfold. Well, the difference between the unilateral decision and this protocol is that this protocol, if you have trade unions coming to negotiate it, is that you have to negotiate this protocol. So in practice, how do we do? In practice, you prepare the protocol, you write it, you put inside all the rules of the election you want to abide by, but the unions can decide to negotiate and can disagree on several terms of the protocol. So it's not quite the same process. And sometimes you can have several meetings with the union if the person from the union want to negotiate on several points and disagree every time with you. So don't be afraid. It's quite rare, though, but it can happen. And the unilateral decision, it's much more easier actually, because you are the one who set up the rules and you have no one to negotiate with. So it's your rules. There's no meeting. It's your rules. You do it, and it's much more simple.
Thank you for this explanation. So if you have any other question after this webinar that comes in your mind, we are pleased to answer them by email or by a Teams meeting, whatever you prefer.
Well, I think this is it.
Yes, I think so too.
So very, thank you very much, all of you, for attending this meeting. And we hope you enjoy it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.